This is Diego, and here with me I have
Morgan.
Jess.
Welcome back to the latest episode of Divide and Conquer. So we're called as such because of our intent behind this podcast. What is our intent, you might ask? Well, we are a group of sport and performance psychology consultants here at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and each episode we pose a question or issue related to resilience and or performance enhancement that we as a group will conquer through our individual answers, and you'll find out pretty quickly our perspectives and stances are often divided. So with that, we hope you enjoy today's episode, which tackles what, Morgan?
The question of, is plateauing ever a good thing? What do y'all think?
Is plateauing ever a good thing? I guess my brain first goes to, if you've noticed that you're plateauing, that by itself would be a good thing, because this means that you have high self-awareness around your performance, and therefore you've noticed when there is in fact a cooling off or a leveling off of your improvement. Now, I will say, if you've plateaued and you don't know the next step and you don't have anyone to support you to help you get to the next step, then I would say that potentially that is not very helpful, and in fact could be a huge deterrent for you moving forward and progressing. And then along with that could be like really high frustration, potential giving up, potential even regressing because you don't know how to break through that plateau. So that's my initial off the top of my head what I think about plateauing.
I am very much inclined to agree with what Jess said. My initial thought was the same. If you're able to recognize that you're plateauing, that in and of itself is not necessarily a bad or a good thing, but it's what you do from there, right? Your response to the fact that you realize you are plateauing. And if you have the resources, knowledge, capability, whatever it may be, to address that plateauing, or even if you want to, that's something else that needs to be considered.
I agree as well that plateauing can be a good thing. However, I think it depends on your mindset. So we talk growth and fixed mindset. Growth being, hey, our belief is that we can get better. We're focused on the process of getting better, which makes effort worthwhile. Challenges are an opportunity to learn. Mistakes are opportunities to learn, and feedback is useful. So when we operate out of that mindset, the feedback that we get from plateauing is useful in order to get better. When we look at plateauing from that mindset of, hey, this is feedback on how can I get better in my process, there becomes an opportunity to be creative with your training, be creative, maybe tune into different parts of your game or different parts of your performance. Maybe it's a red flag to prevent burnout. So if I'm plateauing and I'm trying to find something new, maybe I'm also preventing burnout by changing up the routine a little bit. I'm not doing the same thing over and over and over again, or experiencing the same end state as I've had in the past with that plateau. So I think it really depends on your mindset whether or not plateauing is a good or a bad thing. We know people that operate out of more of a fixed mindset tend to plateau sooner than those who are operating out of a growth mindset, because they don't typically take feedback in a way that is geared towards their development, because the focus is more on the outcome, the end state. So there's not much of a room to interpret a plateau any other way as a barrier.
So then I have a question that would build off of what we were just talking about, which would be, do you think then that more beginner performers or the elite performers would hit plateaus more often? Because you might be able to say, to one extent, someone that is new to any kind of performance would plateau pretty quickly and pretty often early on, because I don't know necessarily what I'm doing yet and or how to fix things unless I'm getting that frequent feedback. However, you think about elite performers and how much more can they improve? So is it maybe that an elite performer in their plateau is actually an okay thing because they are at they literally are at the ceiling of their performance?
So are you saying that elite athletes or beginning athletes are more likely to plateau?
Yeah, so maybe I had two questions in there. Who would be more likely? And then also, if you're looking at elite performers, is it so bad for them because maybe they in fact are at the epitome of their performance capabilities?
I think elite athletes are more likely to plateau. Elite athletes are more likely to plateau in my mind because they've exhausted so many training and they are at the top of their game. Whereas I think beginners, if you adjust one thing, you see dramatic improvements, or there's an opportunity to see dramatic improvement with just one slight adjustment. Whereas when you're an elite, there's less adjustment to make to see a difference. And maybe that's just anecdotally speaking, like thinking back on my own athletic career. I experienced more plateau through college than I did any time club through high school. So just anecdotally, that's where my mind goes, that an elite athlete would plateau more often than a beginner. But I think it's more of a threat to an elite athlete if they plateau, because then there is the question of, am I plateauing because I'm at the top of my game? I think you have to have a very strong belief that you can do better, and that belief would then drive something like more effort towards finding the creative ways to improve.
Well, even as you were talking about that, something that came up in my brain was, could we define consistently high performance as a plateau? If that makes sense. Because if I'm at my peak, I'm at my epitome, and I am consistently reaching that mark, that in fact, if you're going to register certain outcomes, might in fact look like a plateau on paper. And when we talk about high performance and just why even we have a job, that is what we're trying to get you to, is in fact high performance consistently over time. And to me, that would look very much so like that, just flattening off. And so I think that could be a good sign of, even if you're not making these strides anymore, you at least are being very consistent with what you are offering and bringing to the table, which, depending on the sport, depending on the person, depending on your age, all of that stuff, depending on your support staff, I think that could be something that is needed and potentially not even necessarily a bad thing. Although I'm very hesitant to say that because I love growth mindset. I think people can always improve. So in saying that, I'm leery in saying it, but I can see where that would in fact be beneficial to some performers, especially at certain points in their career. Say you're starting to drop off, you're getting a little bit older, might actually go for consistency over the highest performance possible.
Yeah, I'm thinking that the interpretation matters if you're talking about the elite athlete's performance. So like, let's say you're consistently performing at a certain level, but you want to get to the next whatever level that might be, even if it's a fraction of an improvement. And in your head, it's, I can get there because where I'm at now consistently, I just need to adjust, or I need to push, or these are the things I can do to reach that next level or that next fraction of an improvement. Or you could think, I'm never going to get there. Like, this is it. So it's the interpretation of that consistent high level performance of whether or not like I can find a way to make the adjustment to reach that improvement, or this is all I can give. This is all I've got. So it depends on the interpretation in my head.
Agreed. It really does. And I think that everyone obviously is going to put a different emphasis of what is most important. And depending on where you are in your career, that could be different. I have a question for Diego specifically. What do you think hinders people from breaking free from a plateau, or what gets them into a plateau? So what factors are leveling people's performances off?
So speaking anecdotally, whenever I found myself one particular instance where I felt like I was very much plateaued and like in a rut at the same time, which was not good. But at a certain point, that plateau starts to become an internalized belief. So if you believe yourself to be stuck at this level, or to be, this is where your cap is, again, going back to the interpretation, but you're also feeding that belief, right? That's your belief that you hold. You're going to be constantly looking and absorbing information that reaffirms that belief as evidence. So that in and of itself makes it much harder to escape a plateau or rut, whatever you want to call it. I believe that's one of the factors. At least that was for me. I think self-awareness is also a big thing. Granted, I believe high elite performing athletes probably have a great sense of self-awareness, and they're able to, I would assume, they're able to recognize when they're plateauing. So with that great deal of self-awareness, there has to be a changing of belief as well, I think. So whether it's, I've gotten this far, this can't be my cap, or I've gotten this far, this seems to be my cap, this is my cap. Just that difference in and of itself will bleed into the rest of training, performances, anything that athlete will engage in, right? The way they talk to themselves, the way they perceive people giving them feedback, the way they perceive other people talking to them in general about their performances, right? And all that serves as fodder to reaffirm beliefs or change them depending on the athlete themselves. And it took a while for me to get out of that belief, not necessarily plateau. Unfortunately for me, I had to do it on my own because, I had no idea sports psychology was a thing. So for me, it was hard. I felt like I was lacking the support. In reality, I think I probably had it, but I didn't really know what to do with myself when I was in that plateau. And I think that kind of goes along with the self-awareness aspect too. Like, I was self-aware enough to realize I was plateauing, but not necessarily what to do from there.
I think that's a shared sentiment with I imagine a shared sentiment, Diego, that you recognize certain aspects of your performance or certain situations, but you don't know how to fix it or who to go to fix it, or even that it's possible to fix. So I could be aware of something, but is it actually possible to change a belief? How do I exactly do that? So it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So I just absolutely, yes.
I think one other thing to consider would be whether or not people are willing to sacrifice for the next level. So some people aren't willing to put in the time required, because I can foresee that in order to reach the next level, what it might be required is an extra 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours a day, beating on my craft, like honing my craft, making sure that I'm doing what I need to do to get out of the rut or the plateau. And I could see where some people just aren't willing to make that sacrifice. Because when I think of the best in any industry, they sacrifice a lot to be in that position. And some people just aren't willing to go there for whatever reasons: time, resources, family, other values, other priorities. And that's okay. But even coming to that realization, again, self-awareness, to say, I'm okay with this plateau, or I'm okay with this rut, because the next level, it's not where I need to be. At least maybe not right now, or maybe ever.
So there I hear the ability to recognize, just with what you're talking about, of what are you willing to sacrifice or adjust or put into something to get out of a rut or a plateau. I hear the ability to see the end state of the change that you want and break it down into smaller chunks. And then understand, okay, when I do this, there are things that I'm giving up. So how do I continue to motivate myself, push through that sacrifice to actually reach the breakthrough of a plateau? But that chunking or that segmenting is a skill in and of itself. And motivation comes into play quite a bit. So do I also know how to master my own motivation? Because performance outcome, if I'm in a plateau, is no longer a source. In my mind, it's not, at least. Because in that rut, I'm plateauing, so I can't rely on improved performances as reinforcement for the effort. I have to find it from somewhere else. And so now drawing on my own motivation becomes that skill. So, and if we're talking factors that influence plateauing, do I have those skills in my back pocket? Do I have the resources, as Diego, you were talking about? Do I know those resources? Do I feel comfortable approaching those resources to gain those skills? Maybe external factors in plateauing and support systems, but from what we're talking about, it sounds pretty critical.
Even maybe that would be the dropping off or the peak of where talent stops and then work starts. So a lot of people can get pretty far on their talents alone, and then the work starts, and then I'm speaking about Diego specifically. Highly talented human being. And so at some point it becomes that question of maybe back to mindset even. Am I willing to work hard and put in the time and effort beyond my talent alone, or am I not? And that's critical for some people.
We're talking a lot about sport, but I'm curious to hear what you all think. You all meaning Diego and Jess, but also you all out there in the world. I'm curious to know what areas of military performance do you think are considered plateau? Yeah, there are performances, but there's also, in my mind, intangible elements of leadership that's still a part of your performance. So what would plateauing look like in that venue?
Of course, I always want to talk about leadership.
That's what
Yes.
my mind went to too, was trying to like dissect certain parts of leadership that to me could be susceptible to plateauing.
There's so much goodness in that question that we have to push pause on it.
Yes.
Maybe we can try and get a green suitor in here next week to get their perspective as well. So if you're listening and you're interested and you have words to speak on what plateauing looks like in leadership,
Please.
Hint, hint. Nudge, nudge. Wink, wink.
reach out to us, R2 Performance Center, Fort Polk. Facebook, let us know if you want to join our podcast. But
We respond within 6 hours. The statistics are there.
Yeah, thank you for those who are listening and have so diligently spent time, taking time out of their precious schedules to listen to us banter and chat. So thank you for that. And then equally, feel free to comment, write questions. Oh, we did talk about this. If you'd like to have any question answered, please leave a comment below the video and we will potentially answer your question in future episodes.
Yeah, as long as it's within our area of expertise or wheelhouse, we'll do our best to answer them. So feel free to leave them as YouTube comments or under the Facebook posts for these podcasts. And we definitely will see them.
We care about what you care about.
Yes. Anyway, thank you all for listening to this week's episode. We'll catch you next time.
On the flip side.
plateau.